I'd imagine that CallMeCarson is a person that you haven't likely heard about in a long time. His name isn't thought about much these days, with it fading into irrelevance. But if we were to go back a few years, you would see glimpses of his work all over the internet. Carson was everywhere at one time. He was in memes, viral clips, and his own YouTube videos that gained attention online. At the height of his career, Carson was a key figure on YouTube. Everything he touched turned to success in a short time. His influence launched the careers of other channels simply by just working with him. Carson amassed what some would have called a cult status online. This only increased with the number of influential streamers he knew and befriended, from creators like Pokimane and Ludwig to those now facing controversy, like Mizkif. But friends can turn to enemies, and controversy was bound to come into Carson's way. The online community still hasn't fully exonerated him. Some people he once called friends continue to lie about him. Carson's community, which he created, left and cast him away, leaving him to be a YouTube has-been.
The dude looks me in the eyes and tells me that his problem with me the entire time was because, and I quote, he hates me because I'm a Chad.
No one will ever truly know, but what happened to CallMeCarson?
Hey guys, it's been a while. This isn't going to be your average YouTuber apology video. I'm not seeking forgiveness, nor am I looking to make excuses. I'm sure some of you are expecting some long drawn-out video explaining my truth of the situation, but I have no intentions of doing that.
Because the worst part about it all is that he's a genuinely funny guy, and I've genuinely had great times hanging out with him in person.
Carson told the Lunch Club guys, as well as a bunch of close friends of his at the time, that he had been sexting his fans.
Working with him is one of the hardest things that I've ever had to do in my life.
Doing this because I want to turn a negative situation with a lot of eyes on it into something positive.
Like most kids messing around online, Carson jumped from one type of content to another, constantly switching up what he was making. One day it was gaming videos, the next it was meme compilations, then MLG edits, and even an SMP trailer at one point. But if there was one thing that stayed consistent, it was Minecraft. No matter what phase he was in, the game was always in the mix, always in the background or foreground of his channel. In 2013, Carson officially launched what would become his main channel, CallMeCarson, and uploaded his very first video, a short little beta Minecraft clip called Crazy Torch. Truly ahead of its time. But other than this video, there's only a handful of content that Carson has cherry-picked to be up from the early days. We could look over highlights like his face reveal video or his Frosted Flakes review, but these few videos don't have any sense of direction, and it doesn't tell us much about what Carson was making early on. Just a semblance of a smaller creator trying to figure himself out. It's only when we go forward a few years to 2016 that we can start to fit the pieces together. Carson had around 3,000 subscribers, and his videos centered around a variety of games. He would make content about Minecraft, Terraria, Gmod, etc., but his most constant videos at the time were about CSGO. These videos weren't necessarily the cream of the crop of YouTube content. Most of them had very low production value, but what it did have was charm, and Carson specifically making CSGO videos would benefit him in the long run. Through making content on this game, he would make several valuable connections, becoming friends and associates with YouTubers that would blow up and become a part of the YouTube zeitgeist. This would include iNotorious, who would eventually become a part of the Misfits YouTube group, and Raccoon Eggs, who got popular making CSGO funny moments videos. And although it took years for him to finally have the spotlight, he was slowly inching towards the goal of being a full-time YouTuber. At the same time, he was also making friends with people who weren't necessarily trying to be big YouTubers. One of them, a guy running a small channel called The Narrator. Before long, Carson, Raccoon Eggs, and Narrator became a bit of a trio, frequently popping up in each other's videos and playing games together. And from this friendship, something interesting was born. Something that a lot of Carson fans don't even know about. A podcast. On January 10th, 2017, a channel titled Solitairey Confinement Podcast would be created to YouTube, with the first upload on it coming only 10 days later. As previously mentioned, it featured Carson, Rack, and narrator. A lot of these episodes would contain guests, including Fitz, Swagger Souls, and other creators that would end up being important to Carson's career in the future, such as Ted Nivison. You wouldn't be wrong in assuming that the podcast was a nice, chill, and somewhat boring podcast, right? With episodes that never spoke about much. But the podcast was anything but that, being an epicenter for Carson's fights with narrator, a problem which would continue in most, if not every episode. For example, in episode 24, half of the episode centered around a disagreement on whether a previous podcast episode they recorded should even be released publicly, and it got pretty heated.
Okay, everybody, thanks for listening. I'm done.
No. I was seeing how far I could push you. Take a step back,
done.
all right? No.
You might have stopped the recording. I don't know if you did. I'm really scared. Can we stream it?
No. Go
please?
Go back. What were you saying before? I'm serious. I'm gonna listen. Go ahead.
Insert you coughing. Haha, I'm clearing my throat. Lol. Oh, narrator, you were talking? Oh, I was ignoring you. Haha, let's talk over, narrator. Haha.
I was.
Oh, man.
Well.
Fuck him. Look, the meme. Haha.
Get up.
Yeah, because at that point it's just polishing a turd, and I don't want to do it if I'm the one that has to fucking polish it.
What part? That's why I was saying send me the audio. You stupid fuck.
If I can't polish a turd,
That's
what
why I've
makes you think
messaged
you're
you
gonna
on
polish a
at
turd?
least 3. That's why I've
If I
messaged you
can't
on at
fucking
least
do it, then how are
3
you
different
gonna do it?
platforms saying send. Oh, you're complaining about doing your job, first of all. And second
so
of all,
you're
all
gonna-
you have to
you're
do
gonna-
is
you're gonna s-
normalize. Do you know what that?
So you're
do you know what the
gonna drop the podcast into Premiere, and then you're gonna sprinkle some pixie dust in
No,
it. And
I
make it
use
not shit.
No,
Yeah,
I use Audacity because
Not gonna
I
work.
actually work with audio, unlike you, where you drop it into Premiere and lazily put
yeah,
them
we're
together.
not talking about the audio levels right now. We're talking about the
That's
fact that the
literally
podcast
the only
episode
thing that
was
we have
ass.
to talk about. You were complaining about my audio levels. What do you
No,
do?
no,
You
the
go into
podcast
Audacity
is
and
ass.
fix
I
them.
just
You-
explained we were all in a bad frame of mind.
To be completely fair with you, narrator, the podcast was not the best that we've ever recorded.
Thank you.
The entire
Thank
time.
you.
That's why I agreed with putting it on SoundCloud.
Narrator was portrayed and shown to be someone who couldn't shut up, leaving some episodes to be cut short. As a result, the narrator was probably seen really negatively by the audience, right? This would go on to create a problem with the podcast as a whole, and on June 13th, 2018, the final episode of the podcast would be uploaded, featuring Ted Nivison, or Jebediah as he was known at the time, and the channel would go dark from there, seemingly without any word from the host as to why it ended. There would sometimes be tension in the group, particularly in the previously mentioned podcast episode, Arguments, but it wasn't enough for anyone to figure out what actually happened in the time. So, for the next 3 years, it would be left up to public interpretation. Carson and Raccoon Eggs would move on with their careers, while narrator faded from the public eye, eventually being forgotten about entirely. And with that, the podcast faded from people's minds as well. It wasn't until January of 2021 that we'd finally have some solid answers as to what happened. Narrator uploaded a video where he spoke about his experience with Carson, and why the podcast ended. There's a lot to look at in this video. It exposed that Carson and the narrator had a very toxic friendship and just weren't fit for each other. But the bit in the video that's the most important to discuss is their 2018 VidCon trip, because this trip was the thing that would ultimately cause the podcast to dissolve. According to the narrator, while he was going through a manic episode, Carson would constantly poke and make fun of him, which drove him to a breaking point. It got so bad that he apparently almost punched another YouTuber, Alltrive, for making a small comment. Due to these incidents on the trip, Carson wanted to leave the podcast, and this would lead to probably the worst thing to happen in this situation. One of the most damning parts of narrator's video is when he talked about Carson hijacking the podcast channel. Carson would upload an update video to the Solitairey Confinement channel in July or August of 2018, explaining the issues with the podcast and why it ultimately come to an end, but the whole video just came off as really manipulative. Carson would essentially just blame narrator for the entirety of why the podcast was ending, only showing one side of the events to back up his story.
As of right now, the Solitary Confinement group is officially split up. Now, I know a lot of you are going to be confused and want to know what's happening, so I brought a whiteboard. The first thing you guys need to know is it's completely my fault. Do not blame anyone but me for the podcast ending. I personally took issue with some narrators' actions, and that led to a waterfall of events to where we are now. So it all started with VidCon. The convention was great, we had a super fun time, but there were many instances where narrator would do something that I would disagree with, and it would lead to a response from him that I would consider uncalled for. So after VidCon, I spoke to Rack. I went up to him like this, and I said, Rack, I don't really want to do the podcast with narrator anymore. I'm gonna leave. Woo, there I go. That's an arrow. And then Rack was like, well, if you're going, I might as well go myself. So, there he goes. Afterwards, I get back from my trip, and I plan to announce Spit Take in the coming weeks. And I let the people in my stream know what's going on, so they had a little insider info. Ciao. About 2 days in, after I got back from my trip, narrator tweeted on his personal Twitter account about how Rack and I had not kept him in the loop. Now, personally, I don't think there was anything to keep him in the loop on. All we had decided on was a name. But these tweets led to many fans saying that Rack and I were acting like children. I haven't personally spoken to narrator since then. I'm sure he's going to watch this video. I tried hearing him out, but he didn't really send any more messages to me. So I just kind of assume we're not on speaking terms anymore. A few days later, Rack came to me and said, I'm not sure I want to do Spit Take anymore. It feels unfair to narrator, which I completely understood. Instead, he's going to be doing a podcast with JC called Homie Talk, which I'm very excited for. I think it'll be a great podcast. I'm in full support of it, and you guys should be too. And that brings us up to the present pretty much. With fans in disarray, everyone's confused on what's happening, and I'm here to crush people's dreams. As right now, like I said, the Solitairey Confinement group is officially split up. And like I said before, if there's anyone to blame, it's me. If I had not chosen to express my issues with narrator, then the podcast would still be together. Now, I personally think narrator's a terrible person, but that should not in any way affect how you see him. Please continue to support him and don't let any petty behind-the-scenes problems affect how you see us. This stuff happens to everyone. It just so happens that this is a very public friendship.
Although there's a lot of context we don't know about, Carson undoubtedly made a bad move here, hijacking a podcast channel and uploading a video without asking the other two members and bashing one of them for almost the entirety of it isn't how you should handle things like this. It should have been more amicable, instead of pointing at one person. It didn't really matter how Carson handled this at the time, however. This situation didn't really go public at the time, and Carson would go on to become one of the most popular content creators shortly after this. But I'm getting ahead of myself here. Let's talk about the series that would define his channel, recording the internet.
It reminds me of this. Just walking around the park behind people.
On May 3rd, 2018, Carson would upload the video Changes. Around the time of the video, he had around 11,000 subs and was making gaming videos. He was mainly growing due to his association with Raccoon Eggs and the Solitairey Confinement podcast, but he decided to change things up a bit. In the video, he announced that gaming content would be scrubbed from his channel and will be moved to his second channel, CallMeCarson Live. This was due to him wanting to focus his channel around a different style of content, something that he'd seemed very confident in, even mentioning that he felt that he could grow far beyond 11k with what he was planning to do.
For a long time now, I've seen my channel as extremely mediocre. I know a lot of you really like what I make, but I do think it's time for a change. 1 week from now, I'm going to be doing a relaunch of this channel. It's gonna be sick. Now don't worry, the content on this channel is not getting a massive shift, but it is going to be made into something that I think people will like far better than what I'm currently making. More importantly, I think it's something that I will like far more than I'm currently making. This does mean the end of gaming content on this channel. This is something I've been thinking about for a long time, and I personally think I can make far better videos if I just scrap gaming. Get rid of it. I don't like it. I actually really like gaming. I take that back. I'm sorry, gaming.
Carson would upload the first video in a series called Recording the Internet, the first of them being about DeviantArt, with the plot of the video basically being each of his friends browsing the site, posting whatever weird creations they found into a Discord group chat where they would all laugh at it. Personal side tangent, but this was the first video I actually found of Carson and immediately became a fan. This was basically the basic formula for Carson's content: find interesting things on the internet and make fun of them or make bits with a group of friends. Some of his most iconic content would come out during this time period, including videos like invading Discord servers, cursed images and weird pictures of toilets, and sometimes he would also change things up by getting them to make a layout of a fictional place, like a theme park. This might seem a little dated nowadays. Videos like this have come and gone and aren't really popular anymore, but the timing of his uploads made it only a matter of time before he he'd see a large amount of success from that. In 2018, Reddit videos were at the peak of their popularity. You could find videos from the likes of Sorrow TV, Suthouse, or MK, which were just reading off Reddit posts and making jokes out of them. A simple format, sure. There was a lot to hate for this at the time since it was seen as a lazy content, but it worked, and you could see this format live on YouTube Shorts today. Although Carson's content wasn't exactly like this, it appealed to the exact same audience, and as a result, his channel would start to rapidly grow in the next few months. After his videos started to blow up, Discord videos as a concept would also become a trend in itself. Many popular creators at the time, most notably Quackity, would take this format, change it up to fit their style, and run with it. So that just shows how influential this was at the time. It was an easy way to get popular on the platform. Around the same time, Carson also revived his second channel, CallMeCarson Live. On this channel, he would frequently post edited videos that came from his Twitch VODs, sort of a compilation of the funniest moments on his streams. This could be anything from the first video of him building a gaming chair, to playing random fighting games, to even raging at his friends while playing Uno. Along with his main channel, this would help boost his online presence. It would also help to grow his Twitch channel, where he was getting around 1 to 2k views at the time. It seemed like Carson was at the peak of his career. He was a popular YouTuber with a rapidly growing audience, and finally got his dream job to work out for him. For a lot of YouTubers, this is as far as they would go, as they would fade into irrelevance within a couple of years. But little did he know that this was just the beginning.
No! No, Dick!
These no.
No! Kidding! This chicken's on the place, man! Oh!
I've just written a song about tortillas.
In the mid to late 2010s, the Minecraft community was at a steady decline. The peak years of the game were far behind it, and it got this reputation of being a kids game with an annoying fan base. And the release of Fortnite in late 2017 didn't help things, making Minecraft fade further and further into the background. It was still somewhat popular at the time though, sure, but it wasn't something that people were talking about as much. Mojang had a plan, however. They would start releasing big updates to the game in late 2018, causing a spike in interest, and this, combined with the growing nostalgia from older players, would cause the game to have a second peak in relevance. There was another reason why the game got so popular though, that people don't really talk about anymore, and that's where Carson comes into the picture. On March 1st, 2019, the Minecraft server SMPLive would officially begin. It would feature notable creators like 2Mad, Slimeskull, and Antvenom, while also featuring Carson's general friend group. The server was purely for content creation. Everyone that played on the server had to stream on Twitch, or else they weren't allowed to join. There was also a hit system as well. Essentially, if you paid a streamer a certain amount of money depending what they set it to, they would have to seek out another streamer and kill them. And you'd see this exact same hit concept reused for pretty much every Minecraft SMP that revolved around streaming. Shortly after the server was launched, it would quickly blow up in popularity. This was no doubt helped by the fact that Carson had little under 1 million subs when he started it, but what also helped is the addition of one creator who would become one of the biggest content creators in the next few years, and that was Schlatt. Before SMPLive, Schlatt was known for making video essays, with his most popular project at the time being a tribute to Minecraft. He was a modestly successful guy, but he wasn't what you'd call a big YouTuber at the time. That would all change with Carson's server, however. From the first day he was invited, he would make his mark, particularly with his hilarious feud with Antvenom, and from then on, he became one of the biggest reasons for the server's growth. Name any SMP moment that you'd remember from the back of your mind, and Schlatt was probably involved in at least half of those. That's how popular he was. You can argue that the server was a big part in making his career, but you can also argue that he was a big part of what made the server as special as it was. Also, the dynamic between the other streamers featured on the SMP would go on to have successful memes in itself, such as the half jokes, the cook shed, or Carson getting Pokimane into the server to troll her for her entire stay. SMPLive left a considerable mark on the landscape of streaming, and nobody reaped the rewards more than Carson. This got him in contact with a lot of notable and famous streamers. One of these was Raj, who hosted the Rashula, a Twitch-style dating show featuring a bunch of underground streamers, which will become insanely important later on. But with every popular internet phenomenon comes the dreaded word: stans.
None of your content creators, your favorite ones, including me, are your friends.
But it really disturbed me. And there's a lot of things like that that disturbed me.
Stalker fans must be stopped.
We don't care. We honestly don't care. I don't think I have seen a single thing be said about me or about George or Sapnap that I have cared about and gone, oh, that person shouldn't be saying that.
SMPLive was a victim to the increasing culture of a stan base at the peak of 2019, and it would go on to be a massive issue between the server, with Carson having to make an entire stream about how the fanfiction and shipping between his real-life friends have become insanely toxic. Carson even talks about how a stan stole C-Scoop's water bottle, which is no short of fucking creepy.
It creeped me out beyond belief. So if you read it, it says, I went to TwitchCon, I met my favorite streamers, especially Cooper. I may have taken a plastic water bottle that was Cooper's, and I still have it to this day. Which is really fucking weird, and I think to a lot of people that's completely understandable.
It's important to note that at this time, Twitch streaming was becoming insanely massive, and people like Carson were seeking such a benefit from it that it essentially turned his fans into somewhat of a cult. However, this would deter the other streamers and members from continuing to stream on the SMP, and as soon as Carson made a comment about it, it was seemingly left alone. But it wasn't just the stan culture that was ruining SMPLive. A number of internal issues had been plaguing the server's members, which really seemed to distract from the content and the fun of what people were trying to have on the server. This drama was mostly handled privately with the largest people on the server, but from time to time, the public would have glimpses into the chaos behind the scenes. The most notable of these was Arliss Finch. Arliss was a channel that came into the SMP mainly due to his friendship with Schlatt. He was mostly known for doing trolls and operating in random server shenanigans, but would promptly be banned over serious actions, one of which being grooming. And after this, Arliss would only be remembered as the guy who was at the beginning of Schlatt's tribute to Minecraft video. I'd recommend watching this video on everything Arliss did if you want an in-depth breakdown on everything. It's pretty solid and talks about it better than I probably would, but nevertheless, Arliss would be kicked from SMPLive and has seemingly vanished online. SMPLive would officially conclude on January 1st, 2020. Everyone that was on the server had moved on with their careers, with some even moving into a different server, SMP Earth, which was co-created by Chipple Dipple, Will Basur, and Josh A20. Carson himself also seemingly moved on, as he would continue to make his main channel videos and stream on Twitch, but this wouldn't last very long, especially as a private situation would start to spiral out of control and was pushed into the public eye. SMPLive was regarded as one of the most popular SMPs to come out of YouTube. It gave many people connections and careers in their own right, and blasted people who already had an audience into stardom, the biggest of course being Carson, and this contributed into him meeting someone very important to the story. After the breakup of the Solitairey Confinement podcast in 2018, Carson was looking to make a brand new group venture. Originally, he wanted to do something similar with just him and Raccoon Eggs, but that fell through due to mixed opinions about the situation with Narrator. So Carson had a new idea, Unzipped. This group would consist of Carson himself, Josh, Altrive, and Max, or the River. This iteration was short-lived, however. Carson had bigger ideas for what he could do with the project. So in comes the rebrand. The group changes its name to Goop, added and removed some members, and mainly focused on podcast-oriented content, where they tried to rally up some funding. The most notable thing to have happened in this time period was a live stream that every member participated in. Essentially, it was a Minecraft event where if one person dies, everyone dies. They had certain donation goals that would reset things in the game once they were reached, and this was all done to fundraise the group, and the labor of their efforts would finally be shown off in 2020, after the final rebrand. They couldn't use the name Goop anymore due to copyright and trademark issues, so they instead changed it to Lunch Club, with this being the final name that the group went with. And with this, they would finally start to release content. 10 videos would come out on the Lunch Club channel, with them ranging in quality. Their most iconic moments were when they made a video robbing YouTubers and a Try Not to Laugh challenge. These videos would get millions of views each, but even with this success, the group would slow down considerably as 2020 progressed, and part of this was due to problems behind the scenes. In 2022, Josh would make a stream where he addressed some of the problems of Lunch Club. The most notable issues were that the certain members were kicked out for not being popular enough, some members like Slimesicle were pretty much new to this friend group and didn't know anybody, and to top it off, most of their controversies would be about business affairs instead of the content they could be making. Although Josh didn't provide anything to prove that the group was this dysfunctional, considering that he was there and has been consistent the entire time of his story, there aren't really any big reasons to not trust him here. It seems like Lunch Club was more focused on being a profitable business instead of being a good idea in general. This would explain why only YouTubers with the largest sub counts at the time were even considered. A group like Lunch Club definitely had potential in the YouTube landscape. Misfits and offline TV were blowing up around the same time, so it just seemed like the right thing to do. But without a proper direction to go in, this project was doomed to fail. Of course, anyone who knows the history of the group figured out that there was a lot more than just this that played into the group dissolving, but that'll be for later. For now, we need to talk about someone that Carson met who is very important to the story. November 2019, Carson would be featured on the Twitch dating show The Rashula, or Lover Host as it was known later. In the show, the contestant would have to eliminate several female streamers based on if they picked one of two options, love or host. By the end of the show, Carson would pick Twitch streamer Katerino, who ended up choosing love, and this would cause both of their fan bases to freak out at the time. Kate and Carson would go on to frequently collaborate after this, which would cause Kate's career to skyrocket. This would cause people to see them both as a couple and constantly ship the two of them, but at the same time this would cause some skepticism from other parts of the internet, which led to the question, was Kate just using Carson? This would come up due to this one fact. She wasn't known for pretty much anything other than being one of Carson's friends. Make no mistake, her entire brand at this point was connected to Carson and seemingly no way to separate herself. At least with his other friends like Schlatt or Slimeskull, they had their own personalities. They could stop making videos with him anytime and would probably be fine. Kate had nothing that made her stand apart from other Twitch streamers. She didn't have many clips or jokes that got her anywhere. She didn't have some gimmick that she would latch onto. Nothing. Even if she wasn't actually using him, she wasn't making a very smart move for her career's sake. If Carson stopped talking about her, his fan base would completely move on and not stick around. She was so careless with how she was handling things that she apparently didn't have a backup plan if streaming failed for her. She really should have been trying to make her own lane in terms of content, and she would learn this the hard way as time went on. On March 12, 2020, Carson released a statement on his YouTube community tab and Twitter stating that he was taking an indefinite break due to mental health issues. Due to his good reputation at the time, this statement was viewed with unanimous love and support, with every content creator under the sun wishing him well. Nobody knew the exact reason why he was taking a break at the time, but some clues that seemingly filled in the blanks started to surface. Some audience members who were way too invested in Carson's personal life noticed that he was no longer following his friend Fitz or Kate. This would start a theory that Katerino and Carson were actually dating behind the scenes, and Kate cheated on him with Fitz. This would spread far and wide on the internet, eventually getting to Carson's own subreddit, which would lead on to Carson saying, "Ding ding ding, we have a winner." This would spark one of the biggest situations in 2020 by far. Waves of hate would start to come from Carson's fan base as they attacked both Kate and Fitz for what they had allegedly done. Kate would make a statement that essentially ended her career, especially since she blamed what happened on her mental health and depersonalization. And Fitz would get out of this with minimal backlash, since he seemingly owned up to his actions and made a genuine apology. Carson would also make a statement apologizing for making the entire thing a public affair, which people were confused by. The situation would gradually die down after this, and Carson would come back to his platforms with unanimous support after his break finally ended. But hold on a second, there's one aspect of the story that people overlooked at the time. Kate mentioned in her statement that she and Carson weren't in a relationship, but that she led him on. Most people wrote this off due to some of the laughable things she said, but this is noteworthy. If this is true, then Carson and Kate were never actually in a relationship. This would later be corroborated by Anything for Views in early 2021. Although he said that Carson let Fitz hit on Kate, which has never been proven, I think what actually happened in this situation is that Kate might have been using Carson for content and leading him on, but they were never actually dating. In that case, what happened might still be shitty depending on how you look at it. But Carson is for sure in the wrong for putting this out in the public like that. He failed to clarify in his response that he and Kate weren't actually dating, and just said that they did wrong but didn't deserve the hate, due to it being a private matter. This most likely isn't malicious. I doubt he'd make a response in the first place if he wanted to completely screw them over, but it is worth noting. After the amount of attention that the Katerino situation had gotten, Carson began to start dissing himself and his fan base in general from stan culture. He already made steps to this goal with his stream in 2019 that we talked about previously, but he really started to amp things up. His reason for this is unknown, and if it was even related to the Kate situation at all, but that's what happened. This tension between Carson and stans would reach a climax in December 2020, when his friend Josh made a loaded tweet addressing stan culture as a concept. This would be a short-lived drama at the time, as Dream would reply to him with 2 straight-up immature tweets, which sent his ravenous fan base after Josh. Carson would be right there with tweets fanning the flames, making several tweets making fun of stan accounts. This obviously got him some backlash, but it was nothing serious at the time. The worst thing that happened was that stans were digging up all defensive Minecraft usernames that Carson had in 2016, but that was during the time period where everyone was being edgy, and he was just a kid at the time, so this had little to no effect on his reputation. In the next few weeks, Carson would be relatively drama-free. Everything seemed to be going fine for him, and he kept operating as usual, but all of that would change in the beginning of 2021. All started on January 3rd. Some Twitter users found what they thought was a mugshot of Carson and started to claim that he had committed a felony and was going to jail. This would spread like wildfire, with Carson's name trending on Twitter, and these users even claiming that it was his close friend and YouTuber Noah Hugbox who was going to expose him. Noah would seemingly deny these rumors with a tweet that reads, "Why are people straight making shit up right now?" which seemed to calm the drama for a small period. It's also important to note that this supposed mugshot photo comes from an Instagram post that Carson made in 2019, which was likely for a passport or ID. So this idea that he was arrested for some crime seemed pretty flimsy at best. At this point, the general public weren't convinced that Carson was involved in anything scandalous. It seemed like some rumor that got too much attention, and Twitter stands exaggerating things like they always do. But on January 4th, this would all change, and Carson's reputation would be permanently affected for the rest of his time as a content creator. It would start with this tweet from Keemstar, which alleged that Carson had been sexting underage fans. People would reply to him saying that this wasn't a good way to handle things, as Keem should have just reached out to Carson before putting the story out, but everyone slowly started to realize how serious these allegations could be as the day progressed. Keemstar later released an interview with Noah Hugbox and Travis about these allegations. The interview has been criticized multiple different times, with the most notable target being Keemstar, but in reality, Keem did a fine job and asked questions the way he needed to. The actual problem, which the audience seemed to overlook, is a lack of valuable information. Hugbox and Travis apparently didn't even know the ages of the underage girls Carson was talking to. They also didn't know if he stopped or how long ago he spoke to them. These discrepancies would later be disputed by Noah himself on Twitter, with him stating that Carson had changed his story multiple times about what happened, which is why he didn't release any hard details. But even if that's true, that doesn't excuse making this information public. Even if you look at this from Noah's perspective, the way he handled things would allow Carson to completely change the narrative in his favor and lie about what he had done if he chose to respond. It just wasn't a good way of going about things. He definitely should have waited. But luckily for him, some alleged victims of Carson would begin to come forward with their experience. A few hours after the Drama Alert video, a Twitter thread came out from an alleged victim of Carson, where she claimed that she was groomed by him and that nudes were exchanged. This would later be corroborated by Carson's former friend, Joko, who showed Discord messages of Carson admitting to sexting multiple girls. But this thread would have a mixed reception due to one simple problem. Carson was 19 and she was 17. In the messages that Joko showed off in his video, he was clearly remorseful and ashamed for what he had done. He even claimed to have apologized to the victims privately. So this split public opinion. There was a side that thought Carson was some horrible monster who couldn't be redeemed, and there was a side that thought 17 and 19 was not a big deal and he shouldn't have gotten flack for this. And I agree with the latter. While you can absolutely criticize Carson for the nudes thing, messaging a 17-year-old while you're 19 isn't an issue at all. A second allegation would later surface, where the victim was 17 and Carson was 20. This one wasn't taken as seriously at the time, since the only screenshots of their conversations were Snapchat messages that could have been faked, but the person who made these allegations himself had connections to several YouTubers who were close to Carson at the time. She also included an image of Carson reposting an Instagram post about her, so in retrospect, this gives the allegation a lot more credibility than it was originally thought, but it's still never been 100% confirmed. Again, not a big deal. After these situations came to light, everyone from Carson's former friend group, Lunch Club, released statements condemning his behavior. We won't be going too deep into every fucking statement, as some of them aren't really noteworthy, but there are two responses that I wanted to highlight, which came from Jay Schlatt and SlimeSkin. Starting off with Schlatt, he released a video called Carson on his side channel, The Weekly Slap. It starts off pretty transparent, mentioning in clear as day that Carson had told him and the rest of the Lunch Club group that he messaged a 17-year-old in a sexual manner while he was 19. But unfortunately, as the video goes on, it becomes more and more vague with details. In the latter half of the video, he states that after talking with some close friends of Carson and his former roommates, that he wasn't improving where he should have been and was showing signs of continuing his inappropriate behavior.
But a few weeks ago, I started having some conversations with some of Carson's closest friends, including his former roommates. And in my discussions with them, I heard some things that suggested that Carson wasn't improving in the areas that he should have been.
This statement is very fucking vague, but considering the nature of these allegations, it's believed that he meant that Carson may have continued to pursue underage girls. But there's one issue with this. There's no evidence. In fact, the only situations that were put out publicly were from 2019. A lot of Schlatt's video is meant to establish that Carson hadn't been very honest to his friends behind the scenes, and I think what he said here was meant to reinforce that fact, but I wish he clarified what exactly he meant and made it crystal clear. Though, there's no evidence that Schlatt was outright lying about anything alleged in this video, unlike Slimesicle. On January 5th, he released a statement of his own, where he lays out a timeline of events as to when everything happened. He alleged that in early 2020, Carson told him, the rest of the group, and their manager about the 17-19 situation. After hearing this, he decided to completely sever his connection to Carson, leave Lunch Club, and report the information to the federal law enforcement, as he saw it as a serious crime. This statement doesn't seem bad at first, but if you look into it, there's a pretty big hole in the story. The time frame that Slime mentions is early 2020, and he doesn't mention any specific dates. But if we go back to Schlatt's weekly slap video, this time frame was likely late February to early March of 2020. If we assume this time period to be correct, then Slime's Skull lied about disassociating with Carson. Carson and Slime kept interacting on Twitter until late June 2020. He was in Carson's Jackbox and Twitch streams a month earlier, and on top of it, Slime even featured in his game show video, which was filmed in June. Slime's Skull undoubtedly lied, and this lowers the credibility of his statement by a decent amount. This puts into question if law enforcement was even contacted, or if he ever disassociated with Carson before the allegations came out to begin with. We'll never know the truth about this stuff though, as Slime never made a follow-up post to clear up any discrepancies. The audience took everything he and everyone else said as fact, without questioning anything. Due to this, Carson's reputation would quickly plummet. He went from one of the most loved individuals on YouTube to the internet's #1 enemy. He lost hundreds of thousands of subscribers with every passing day, with his career seemingly becoming a sinking ship that couldn't be recovered. And with this, Carson would completely disappear from the public eye. After his allegations, Carson wouldn't be heard from for months, aside from a few tweets that he would quickly delete and an Instagram story of him playing with his cat. He was silent from all platforms. Anytime you would make one of these accidental posts, there would be a lot of talk about it, with there usually being a mix of positive and negative responses. Although a lot of the internet was mad at him, there was also a large portion of his fanbase that stuck by his side and wanted to see him return. But initially, Carson himself didn't plan on coming back. He cited the amount of eyes on this situation and how popular he was as reasons that he didn't want to come back to being an online creator. He would eventually make a pros and cons list of coming back, and it wasn't until he came up with a new idea that he would finally return: the year of charity.
Did you debate on never coming back?
Oh yeah. After something like that, it's like, well, how much do I really care? There were many times where I was just looking at like the discourse and I was like, this is just annoying, and it's such a pain having so many people know my name. And I had already had this like lack of anonymity that I didn't really love. I definitely made like a pro and con list of coming back. But it wasn't until the whole year of charity idea popped up where I was like, okay, this is a good way to come back and have like a reason for me to actually do this.
Essentially, Carson would give the profit that he made from his YouTube channels and Twitch streams to charity, and this would go on for an entire year. With this in mind, Carson would finally start to make his videos again. In June of 2021, Carson came back with a tweet that reads, "Give me a little bit longer." He was hinting that some sort of return, which gave everyone in his audience high hopes, and 2 months later, Carson would appear on the Twitch streamer Mizkif stream, making his first public appearance since January. This would cause a lot of backlash towards Mizkif at the time, as the stream was taken as him platforming an alleged groomer. But since Carson himself confirmed that he would be returning in this exact stream, it got everyone curious as to what exactly he'd come back with. Would he finally respond to his career-damning allegations? Would he clear up things and set the record straight? Well, not exactly. In late August, he released a video, Moving Forward. His strategy with his response was to completely move past his situation and change it into something a bit more positive. He didn't address a single thing of what he'd been accused of, and instead decided to make his year of charity idea public, with it starting in September. This video had very mixed reception at the time. Carson's fanbase reacted very positively and didn't make any issues with it, but commentary channels were very confused by his approach and why he would decide to just leave these very serious allegations completely unanswered. This criticism was short-lived, however, as everyone moved on. Carson would officially come back to streaming in September of 2021, with his second channel becoming active at the same time. Though people would slowly start to lose interest, there's no denying that Carson is a good entertainer on his own, but a lot of the value from his content came off of how his jokes bounced off of his friends, and once they were out of the picture, his fans were there for people like Schlatt or Slime had no reason to stay. That, combined with his worse reputation, made people generally less interested in him. For any other content creator, this might have demotivated them and slowed slowed them down, but this was not the case for Carson. In fact, he was releasing content on a frequent basis. In early 2022, he came back to his Recording the Internet series with his new friend group. This consists most notably of the YouTubers Katerino, Quacks, Husky Moment, or Loki or is known as, and a few others. He would commit to uploading one video every Saturday, although this schedule would slowly slow down over time, and all seemed well. Although he wasn't at the same level of success that he was previously, the whole thing could have been a lot worse. Carson was generally free of drama now, and was just making content to entertain his loyal fan base. However, there is a person that still, to this day, cannot stop talking about Carson. Noah Hugbox. Noah released a twit-longer titled Game Over, where he went in depth about many topics, but mainly talked about Mizkif, Ryan P, and Carson. There's a lot to say about the content of this twit-longer, but the problem is that Noah himself never provided evidence for the claims. For all we know, he could just be making shit up. Nobody knows the truth at this point, which is why this didn't have much of an impact. Noah would have one last swing at Carson in early 2023, where he alleged that Carson tried to fly a 16-year-old out to the house they were all sharing in 2019. But this allegation would also have no evidence attached to it, and wouldn't do much harm to Carson's already poor reputation. His fans that were currently watching his videos had pretty much forgiven him at this point, and didn't care about the tweet, while everyone that hated him just had their opinions reaffirmed. This allegation would never be elaborated on in the 2 years that it's been made, leading it to fall into obscurity as the years go on. This would be the last time that the Carson situation was talked about on a wide scale, as everyone finally moved on. As of 2025, Carson has made a loyal and passionate fan base. He has continued to be active on every platform, with the only one slowing down being his main channel. His fan base has even started an ongoing bit where they joke about simpler times, referring to Carson's old content from 2018 to 2020. Everyone seems to have fully moved on. This seems to have been healthy for Carson too. On a Reddit Q&A, Carson mentioned that his small audience is a lot easier to comprehend than when he had millions of followers. So, in a weird way, everything happening did seem to truly benefit the guy, which is not usually what happens in situations like these. In recent times, Carson's name was shortly put back into the spotlight due to his negative comments about the game, Garn47, with the game's creator venting about his opinions on Twitter, but eventually completely walking back those statements. This would cause people to criticize him and his audience for being immature about the game and being too harsh, but this drama would really never go anywhere past this point. The most recent development with Carson is his latest project, Orbob, a new YouTube channel with fellow YouTuber Katerino. The videos on here are sort of like a podcast, though it's a lot more unhinged. One of the episodes have Carson and Katerino praising Apple products for 8 minutes, so that's interesting. And that's pretty much where our story ends as of now. I want to make it clear that although a significant portion of this video was defending Carson, he is far from perfect, and he is not above criticism. Throughout the past 7 years that he has had notoriety on the platform, he's made countless mistakes that undeniably ended up pushing people away in the end. But ask yourself this: did he deserve what he got? Did he deserve to be constantly labelled as a paedophile or a groomer online? All for a situation that's way more nuanced than that. I'll let you come to your own conclusion with that. But with that being said, I've been Spindling, and thanks for watching.